After the death of the queen, her body was discarded in the wilderness. Once the soldiers left, a woman who looked exactly like the queen emerged from the forest. She called out as she turned over the queen's body. It turned out they were twin sisters, daughters of a high-ranking official. The elder sister, Unchai, was gentle and quiet, while the younger, Unbo, was lively and spirited. However, these two lovely girls could only share a single identity. Twins were considered inauspicious. The sisters took turns going out in public. One day, it was Unbo's turn to go out. As soon as she stepped outside, she bumped into a boy. Before she could react, the boy pulled her along and started running. A young noble chased after them. They ran into a secluded corner, and Unbo realized the boy must have stolen the noble's jade pendant. Just as she was about to tell him to return it, the noble appeared and grabbed them both to take them to the authorities. He mistook Unbo for the thief's accomplice. During the struggle, the boy fell and cried that his mother was dying, and he needed to sell the jade to buy medicine. Moved by his story, Unbo gave him all the coins she had to buy medicine and made him apologize to the noble. After that, the boy left. However, the noble still believed Unbo was the accomplice and asked her to take him to someone who could vouch for her identity. Left with no choice, Unbo took him to the place where her father often taught Confucian scholars, but her father happened to be absent that day. The noble thought she was lying and asked who her father was. Unbo answered, and he reluctantly believed her. Unbo noticed his arrogant demeanor and became curious about his identity. The noble said he was the crown prince, the future king. Unbo didn't believe him but still wished him well as a wise ruler. At that moment, an old woman came to ask Unbo to read a letter for her. Unbo read it aloud and even helped her write a reply. The crown prince silently watched Unbo, feeling a different kind of emotion toward this kind-hearted girl. He even guided her hand to write his name, and their closeness made Unbo blush. Just as Unbo was about to introduce herself, a group of soldiers suddenly appeared and arrested all the scholars. To protect his identity, the crown prince grabbed Unbo and fled. During the escape, he got injured. With no money, Unbo took his jade pendant to find a doctor. As soon as she left, his attendants found him, and the two were separated. A few days later, Unbo received a letter from the crown prince saying he would come find her soon. But before he could arrive, her father was framed and died under mysterious circumstances. The person behind this was the powerful official Kim Dane, who had tried to win over her father. After being rejected, Kim became enraged and sought to capture Unbo as revenge. Unchai saw that someone was after her sister and quickly hid her in a crate on a boat, pretending they were playing hide and seek. Some men boarded the boat and took Unchai away. A family servant tried to intervene but was pushed aside. In the scuffle, the crate with Unbo inside fell into the water, knocking Unbo unconscious. The servant got up and chased after the captors, managing to get Unchai onto the boat. As they were leaving, someone on the dock called out to them. Unchai told her parents that the general intended to take her away and explained everything. Her father immediately asked where Unbo was. Only then did Unchai remember the crate. By then, it had already drifted away, and Unbo was missing. 10 years passed. Unchai had grown into a graceful young lady. The king was now choosing a queen, and Unchai was one of the candidates. The king was told the next candidate was the daughter of former academic official Kong Lisu, and this reminded him of something that happened 10 years ago. The girl he met turned out to be the daughter of Kong Lishu. Seeing the woman he once loved standing right before him, the king couldn't help but lift the curtain for a better look. After the others had left, he approached Unchai again and asked her something. If she was the one he met 10 years ago, thinking she was Unbo, but she was confused. Though he felt a bit disappointed by her answer, he quickly accepted it. Unchai, too, was moved by the king's affectionate gaze. A few nights later, the king disguised himself and visited Unchai. They strolled through the night market and took a small boat ride. The king remarked that Unchai had changed a lot. 10 years ago, she was a bold and mischievous girl. He hadn't expected her to become so quiet and refined now. Unchai immediately realized that the person the king had met 10 years ago was her twin sister. After several rounds of selection, Unchai was chosen to be queen, but on the day of the royal wedding, she was assassinated in broad daylight. As the king rushed to find her, he too was shot in the head and collapsed on the spot. A nation cannot be without a king even for a day. So the Grand Queen Dowager decided to appoint Prince Ha as the next king. Meanwhile, the Unchai who had gone missing 10 years earlier had actually been living in the capital all along. The gun used to assassinate the king had been sold through her. In order to survive, she disguised herself as a shaman and entered the palace to retrieve the bullet from the king's body and destroy the evidence. But just as she began her search, the supposedly dead king suddenly grabbed her hand. Startled, Unchai fled immediately, not caring about the bullet anymore. On her way out, she was spotted by Lord Bai, an official who had known her father. She looked exactly like the deceased queen. Soon, the king also walked out, very much alive, and everyone knelt in shock and awe. To restore order, the left prime minister and the Grand Queen Dowager conspired to place all the blame on the late queen. As a result, her father was executed. In the crowd, Unchai watched helplessly as her father was put to death. It turned out that a few days earlier, Lord Bai had secretly found her and revealed the truth. To avenge her family, Unchai decided to participate in the new queen selection process. Life moved quickly. Each woman walked with a cloth on her head and red sashes underfoot, not to compete in a beauty pageant, but to be chosen as queen. During room assignments by lottery, the prime minister's daughter, who had already participated in the selection 3 times, saw Unchai and was so shocked she collapsed to the ground. She thought the dead queen had come back to life. Flustered, she quickly returned to her room, only to see Unchai walk in. They were assigned to the same room. Once again frightened, the prime minister's daughter tried to flee. Seeing her reaction, Unchai realized she must have seen her twin sister before. After they left, the spiteful daughter of the Kim family passed by and intentionally ruined the prime minister's daughter's dress for the first selection. The girl was at a loss, while the Kim girl stood there with a smug smile, not even denying what she had done. This infuriated the prime minister's daughter. Just then, Unchai returned. Unwilling to tolerate the Kim girl's arrogance, she called her out directly, nearly angering her to death. Back in their room, Unchai advised the prime minister's daughter to cover the torn area with embroidery. The other court women, also fed up with the Kim girl's behavior, volunteered to help. With everyone's help, the dress was fixed in time. The next day, when the candidates met the Grand Queen Dowager, she noticed the embroidery on the dress and praised the craftsmanship. This made the prime minister's daughter very happy. Midway through the selection, the king suddenly appeared and announced that he too would participate in choosing his queen. When it was Unchai's turn to bow, the king found her silhouette strangely familiar. He stepped forward, lifted the curtain, and grabbed her hand. As Unchai turned to face him, the king was stunned. Her face was exactly the same as the queen's. Without thinking, he called out, "Unchai, it's you." Then, ignoring the Grand Queen Dowager's objections, he pulled her into his arms. The Grand Queen Dowager had no choice but to end the meeting. After the court ladies had left, the king, now calmer, asked Unchai what was going on. She pretended not to understand what he meant and claimed to be just another candidate in the queen selection. Left with no choice, the king let her go. But in his heart, he was certain this was the queen who had supposedly died. This time, he vowed to protect the woman he loved and never let her be harmed again. That night, while the court ladies were dining, the Kim family's daughter deliberately commented that the king had behaved that way because Unchai looked very much like the former queen, who had died tragically. Unchai responded with apparent gratitude, saying she had been curious about the queen's supposed resurrection as well. Rumors about the queen returning from the dead quickly spread throughout the palace, leaving everyone uneasy. This also meant that Unchai's path in the queen selection process would now be riddled with threats. Sure enough, the very next day, she became a target. In their determination to become queen, the women went to extreme lengths, removing hairpins, pricking their fingers, and smearing blood onto their dress sashes. When the royal physiognomist came by, he noticed the blood mark and announced something that shocked all the other women. Unchai smiled subtly. Then the physiognomist spotted another woman with blood on her sash, hesitated, and seemed confused. After the round ended, someone asked him which one truly had the queen's aura. The physiognomist thought for a while, then walked over and pointed at Unchai, saying she was the one. This nearly drove the Kim family's daughter mad with jealousy. It turned out she had bribed the physiognomist ahead of time and instructed a maid to mark her sash secretly with blood as a sign. However, the clever Unchai had noticed the scheme, figured something was up, and copied the tactic herself, winning the first round with wit. But hidden sabotage was relentless. In the second round, the rule was, any woman who left lip powder on the testing paper would lose points. When Unchai's turn came, the paper strangely showed a red mark, even though she hadn't used any lip color. She then noticed the smug look on the Kim girl's face and realized she must have bribed the maid to tamper with the test paper. Yet Unchai had no way to prove it. The third round required the women to wipe their faces with towels. Having learned her lesson, Unchai sniffed the towel first and detected a chemical meant to cause redness and irritation. As soon as she touched it, her skin began to react. The chubby girl next to her also suffered from the same trick. The next phase involved small medicine pouches, each containing a note with an amount of silver. The silver was to be used to help the common people. 2 days later, at the city gates, a large crowd of civilians would gather, and the ladies would use their silver to help however they could. The people would then vote for who they believed deserved to be queen. After explaining the rules, the organizer had each lady draw a pouch. The Kim girl, first to draw, locked eyes with the maid and confidently took the marked pouch. Sure enough, it contained the highest amount. The rest took turns. When it was Unchai's turn, she casually picked one, only to find it contained just one tail. 2 days later, the court ladies each showed off their talents. Some brought food, others festive flowers, and a few even hired doctors to consult with the sick. Unchai, however, used her one tail to buy paper and brushes. She went to a quiet corner, laid out her materials. Her plan was to write petitions for the common people. Many civilians had been oppressed or wronged, but they were illiterate and couldn't write complaints. Soon, a crowd gathered around Unchai. When the Kim girl saw, she realized most of the petitions were complaints against her family. Furious, she dragged Unchai to a secluded spot and slapped her hard. But Unchai wasn't one to back down. She slapped her right back. In the next moment, the Kim family's servants struck Unchai and knocked her unconscious. The unconscious Unchai was shoved into a cart and transported out of the city by several strong men. Meanwhile, the queen's selection was nearing its final stage. After voting ended, the main attendant noticed Unchai was missing and ordered a maid to look for her. She warned that if Unchai didn't return before dark, she would be disqualified. The Kim girl, who had ordered the kidnapping, looked smug and satisfied. At the same time, the king was informed of Unchai's disappearance. He was about to dispatch the royal guards when he suddenly remembered a dream from the night before. In the dream, Unchai was bound inside a cart, passing by a dry well. Alarmed, he ordered a map brought to him and commanded the guards to search every dry well within 5 li, about 2.5 kilometers, of the city. The guards scoured the area but came back with nothing, infuriating the king. Then the king remembered a detail from the dream. The area around the well was parched, with no water. He deduced that the well might have been abandoned. Checking an old map, he found the location of an abandoned well and, deeply worried, decided to go personally. When he arrived at the site, he saw clear cart tracks on the ground. Meanwhile, Unchai regained consciousness and realized she was locked inside a room. She stood up and tried to break the door open. The kidnappers outside heard a noise and opened the door. One of them told Unchai not to waste her energy. There was no way she could escape. Upon seeing Unchai's beautiful face, the kidnapper's intentions turned lecherous. As he stepped closer, about to harm her, the king arrived just in time. By the ordeal, Unchai fainted. When she regained consciousness, night had already fallen. In a panic, she insisted she needed to return to the palace immediately. The king, clearly frustrated, asked, "You nearly died, and you still want to return to the selection? Do you want to become queen that badly?" Then he said, "If that's what you want, then just admit it. You're the queen who returned from the dead. I'll immediately restore your identity." Meanwhile, back at the palace, her absence had caused unrest among the candidates. The head attendant was forced to eliminate her from the selection. However, at midnight, Unchai unexpectedly returned and reported that she had been kidnapped. The head attendant temporarily reversed the disqualification. The Kim family's daughter was furious. Even more upsetting was the voting result. Unchai had received more than double the votes of any other candidate. The head attendant declared that a full investigation was needed before deciding if Unchai could continue in the selection. Once the others left, Unchai confronted the Kim family's daughter and warned her she had evidence that her family was behind the kidnapping. She demanded the girl confess to the head attendant that she had witnessed the abduction. Otherwise, Unchai would hand over the evidence. She gave her until morning to decide. The next day, after a brief stare-down between the two women, the Kim girl voluntarily stepped forward and claimed she had seen Unchai being kidnapped. With a witness, there was no longer a reason to disqualify her, and Unchai was allowed to advance to the next stage. Everyone feeling threatened. If anyone wanted to eliminate her now, they'd have to prove she wasn't truly from the royal girl. She passed this news to the left prime minister. He told her to focus on the competition, he would handle the rest. The next day's challenge was to prepare a dish for the Dowager Queen. Everyone drew lots to see which dish they had to make. The rule was, if two contestants drew the same dish, only one would advance. Unchai and the chubby girl both got the same dish, steamed rice cakes. At a time like this, even close friendships had to be set aside. The chubby girl quickly grabbed all the ingredients she needed without hesitation. Elsewhere, the Kim girl and the left prime minister's daughter also happened to draw the same dish. Neither was willing to back down, and time was slipping away. The left minister's daughter came up with an idea. Since neither wanted to be eliminated, they could just work together. The Kim girl had no choice but to agree. Meanwhile, Unchai and the chubby girl had nearly finished cooking. Once everyone was done, the dishes were presented. The Kim girl and the left minister's daughter had only prepared one bowl together, so they couldn't be scored. Both were eliminated. Then came the turn for Unchai and the chubby girl's dishes. The Dowager Queen tasted Unchai's rice cake first and said it was pretty good. She tried the chubby girl's, but it was too oily. Confused, Unchai asked, "Why did you use so much oil on purpose?" The chubby girl smiled and said, "I'm already content to have made it this far. I know you have a reason, you must become queen. Besides, I don't even like men like the king." Unchai was deeply touched by her honesty. As she was tearfully saying goodbye to the chubby girl, she suddenly saw a familiar figure in the crowd. A commotion broke out. A man was being dragged away, screaming. It turned out the man being dragged away was Unchai's close friend. Though she didn't understand why he was arrested, Unchai immediately went to see the king and begged for Yu's release. The king asked her what relationship they had. Unchai lied, saying she was Unchai's sister, Unbo, and that Yu had saved her after she was thrown into the mass grave. She said she hadn't revealed herself before because she thought the king had abandoned her. She joined the queen selection not to win the crown, but to uncover the truth about who tried to kill her. Upon hearing this, the king was filled with guilt. His beloved had endured so much suffering. He promised to release Yu, but also asked her to withdraw from the competition. Unchai, however, refused. "If I leave now, it'll only arouse suspicion. We're at the final stage. The real culprit will make another move. We can't miss that chance." Though the king was reluctant to let her risk herself again, Unchai stood firm. Soon after, Yu was released from prison. To reassure her, the king secretly arranged for them to meet. Seeing each other alive and safe again, Yu was overcome with emotion. Their warm reunion made the king burn with jealousy. Trying to distract himself, the king asked Yu about the night he was arrested. That night, Yu had entered the government hall to catch the real killer involved in a gunfire incident. He explained that he had gone there to meet a contact but instead found two people already lying on the ground. As one of them took his last breath, he uttered only two words, "Kai Ping." But what Kai Ping referred to, Yu didn't know. Unchai finally realized that the king had been secretly investigating the murder of her sister and working tirelessly to clear her father's name. She was deeply moved and began to see the king in a new light. Elsewhere, the left prime minister, determined to make his daughter queen, ordered a secret investigation into Unchai's true identity. They discovered the real Hong family girl was living in the countryside, and Unchai had assumed her identity. The left minister leaked this information to the Kim family, knowing they would take drastic measures to eliminate their competition. After receiving the news, the Kim family quickly began scheming. They instructed their daughter, who was still in the queen selection process, to quietly spread the rumor that Unchai was actually the former queen who had returned from the dead. At the same time, the dowager queen, also from the Kim family, ordered one of her court ladies to deliver a secret letter to Unchai. Hiding in the shadows, the prime minister's daughter observed everything. Unchai opened the letter. It read, "Your father's killer is right in front of you." Though confused by the message, she kept her expression neutral. She couldn't risk exposing her identity. What she didn't expect, however, was that the next morning, the court lady who had delivered the letter was found dead. The royal investigator discovered that the court lady had visited the lady's residence the previous night. He immediately summoned all the candidates and asked who had met with the deceased court lady. The prime minister's daughter stepped forward and claimed to have seen Unchai speaking with her. Unchai admitted to the meeting, and the investigator ordered her room to be searched. Shockingly, they found a vial of poison, identical to the one that had killed the court lady. Unchai couldn't defend herself and was arrested on the spot. What no one knew was that the king had dreamed this very moment, a vision where his beloved was falsely accused and framed for murder. When the arrest actually happened, he was filled with anxiety and anger, ready to rush to Unchai's rescue. But Chief Eunuch Huang stopped him, urging the king to find proof of Unchai's innocence before acting. Only then could she be cleared properly. Thinking back to his dream, the king remembered that the person who had framed Unchai had been wearing an orchid-embroidered handkerchief, something only the selection candidates might possess. Without any solid evidence, the king asked the queen dowager to authorize a search of all the women's quarters. The search was thorough, and eventually, one of the court ladies found the orchid-embroidered handkerchief hidden in a bundle belonging to a girl from the Heo family. Under the king's stern questioning, the Heo girl broke down. She revealed that Minister Hang from the Ministry of Justice had threatened her using her family's names. He'd ordered her to plant the poison, but she insisted she didn't know it would be used to kill. With her confession, the king immediately ordered Minister Hang's arrest. At that very moment, Unchai was being interrogated, while Minister Hang prepared to force a confession from her. Luckily, the royal guard stormed in just in time and arrested him before he could harm her. Upon learning that Minister Hang had been captured, the Kim family panicked. Fearing he would reveal their involvement, they decided to abandon him. That night, Minister Kim visited him in prison. Minister Hang, assuming he had come to rescue him, was hopeful, but instead, Kim threatened him to stay silent or his family would suffer. Minister Hang was furious, but for the sake of his loved ones, he took the blame for everything and confessed. Thanks to this, Unchai was declared innocent and released. Her status as a court lady was fully restored. The Heo girl, however, was stripped of her title and expelled from the palace. Though Minister Hang had taken the fall, the king knew full well that the real puppet masters behind everything were the Kims. But their political influence was vast, deeply rooted in the court. Dismantling their power would take time and care. That night, the king met with Unchai in secret. She had realized by then that he was the one who had risked everything to save her. Moved, she thanked him sincerely. The king simply replied, "This is what I should have done." As she looked at him, the man who had repeatedly put himself in danger for her, Unchai finally let her guard down and spoke the words she had long held in her heart. The king could no longer suppress the feelings in his heart. He held Unchai tightly in his arms. In this palace full of danger and deceit, the two of them finally touched each other's hearts, even if only briefly. The next day marked the long-awaited final test of the queen selection, a tradition that hadn't reached this stage in 7 generations. It was the ultimate trial to determine the next queen. The queen dowager asked the final 3 candidates a simple but powerful question: "What are you willing to give up to become queen?" The Kim family's daughter responded first. She opened her box to reveal a pair of ornate embroidered shoes, a gift from her powerful uncle. She explained that becoming queen required her to sever political ties, and these shoes symbolized her family's influence. She was ready to abandon that legacy. The queen dowager praised her answer, though it enraged the dowager queen, also from the Kim family, who saw it as a betrayal of their clan. Next, it was the prime minister's daughter's turn. She offered up a torn skirt from the early stages of the selection. It held memories of her fear and sorrow, as well as the kindness and support she'd received when fellow court ladies helped her mend it. To her, it represented her past. Giving it up meant leaving her old self behind and starting anew. Finally, it was Unchai's turn. She presented a pair of silver chopsticks. These were standard in the palace, but among commoners, people used wooden ones, or even their bare hands if they couldn't afford utensils. The dowager queen scoffed, mocking Unchai as if she were pretending to know the lives of the common folk. Unchai calmly replied, "I've seen it with my own eyes. That's why I must give these up." She explained that a queen should empathize with her people's suffering. Her answer was flawless. Even so, the Queen Dowager stated the final decision would be made after consulting with the other royal women. The result would be announced in 3 days. That night, the king had another prophetic dream. He saw the left chancellor seizing Unchai's mother and exposing Unchai's true identity in front of the entire court. Jolted awake, the king immediately ordered his attendants to locate her mother. They discovered she had already been taken days earlier. To stop the nightmare from coming true, the king summoned the left chancellor directly and confronted him about the plot. He admitted it without shame and issued a threat. If the king named his daughter as queen, he would release Unchai's mother and stay silent about Unchai's identity. Enraged, the king held back for the sake of Unchai's safety. Meanwhile, the Queen Dowager and the other noble women had unanimously decided to name Unchai the new queen. Just as they were about to make the announcement, the king stormed in and tore the decree in front of everyone. He instead declared the prime minister's daughter would become queen. When the Queen Dowager officially made that announcement, Unchai was completely stunned. Days passed in sorrow. Then the king came to see her. He admitted that he was the one who had chosen another to be queen. Angry and heartbroken, Unchai turned her back on him. The king then explained everything: the dream, the threat, and how he did it all to protect her and her mother. Hearing that her mother was safe, Unchai finally calmed down. Seeing that she was no longer upset, the king took her hand and led her out. Together, they walked to the riverside, experiencing a rare, peaceful moment like a couple in love. That brief happiness gave the king clarity. He would no longer hide their love. He would keep Unchai by his side, no matter what. Having received her heartfelt agreement, he returned to the palace. Soon after, he made a bold move. He married 3 women at once, 1 queen and 2 concubines. On their wedding night, the new queen waited in the bridal chamber, but the king treated her with cold indifference. She was hurt and asked why he would say such cruel words on their first night together. The king responded flatly, "On the first day of becoming crown princess, some women were gunned down in public. What you're going through is nothing compared to that." Then he walked out. He went directly to Unchai's quarters. With warmth in his voice, still, he didn't question her further and told her to get some rest. The next day, Lord Bai, a close friend of Unchai's father, sent a secret message asking to meet. When Unchai arrived at the designated place, Lord Bai reassured her that her mother was safe and asked for her help before they could be reunited. He handed her a small keepsake. It turned out that Lord Bai and Unchai's father had long been loyal to the rightful army. 10 years ago, the young king had been threatened by the left chancellor, who had found his lost royal token outside the palace. Using it as leverage, he forced him to demote Unchai's father. Lord Bai believed the king is not capable. Minister Bai told Unchai that the king was not only timid but also unable to distinguish right from wrong. Because of that, they planned to support the great general to take the throne. When Unchai heard that she was expected to poison the king, she was completely stunned. Minister Bai explained that the poison wouldn't be immediately fatal. Once the task was completed, she should leave the palace right away, and someone would escort her out safely. However, Unchai firmly refused. She said she had already fallen for the king, but Minister Bai threatened her. If she didn't comply, not only would her mother be in danger, but her secret identity as the queen's long-lost twin sister would be exposed. If that happened, not just her mother, but everyone around her would be at risk. With that, he forced the poison into her hands and gave her a 3-day deadline to kill the king. Unchai was torn. On one side, her family, on the other, the person she loved. How was she supposed to choose? With trembling hands, she dropped the poison into the tea. When the king arrived, Unchai handed her a cup. The king asked, "What tea is this?" Unchai replied, "Morning tea." The king then asked, "Has the gunshot wound from our wedding day healed?" Feeling guilty, Unchai said it had. But to her surprise, the king coldly replied, "You've never even seen this kind of wound, have you?" At that moment, Unchai realized. The king suspected her. The truth was, the king had dreamed the night before of Unchai putting something into a teapot. To test her, the king lifted the cup, pretending to drink. In a panic, Unchai knocked it away. The king grabbed her wrist and demanded, "Who are you? Who are you really?" The next day, the king summoned Unchai's supposed father, Minister Hong, and questioned him about whether he had ordered Unchai to poison her. Minister Hong denied it but also didn't expose Minister Bai. He only said Unchai had no choice and that it wasn't her true intention. Getting no answers from him, the king went back to Unchai and told her, "If you won't speak, then Minister Hong and your friends will be in danger." This time, Unchai finally opened up. She revealed that she was the queen's twin sister and told the king about what really happened 10 years ago. At that moment, the king realized that the girl he had met all those years ago wasn't Unbo, but Unchai. But one thing he still couldn't understand: why would Unchai try to poison him? Unchai then explained everything: how Minister Bai had threatened her using her mother's safety, and how the great general was plotting a coup. Upon learning the truth, the king was shocked and furious. Ignoring Unchai's pleas, he stormed out, removed Unchai's house arrest, and ordered guards to monitor her every move. He also commanded that Minister Bai be captured. Minister Bai was quickly apprehended. The king personally interrogated him about the general's whereabouts. Knowing he wouldn't escape death, Bai took full responsibility for the plot. The king allowed him to take his own life, preserving some dignity. Once everything was dealt with, the king went to see Unchai. Unchai begged the king to execute her, but the king said, "You've done so many things to hurt me. Now you want to wipe it all away by dying? How could I allow that?" Unchai, with pain in her heart, told him, "When I poisoned you, I poured a cup for myself too." She had believed the king would never trust her again, so she decided to leave. Unexpectedly, the king grabbed her hand. Hearing her words, the king could no longer suppress his feelings, and this moment was seen by none other than the queen. And a woman's jealousy can be terrifying. Seeing the man she loved holding another woman in his arms, the queen's jealousy erupted like fire. She decided it was time to teach Unchai a lesson and ordered her to be brought to her. Just as she was about to punish her, the king arrived, having heard the news. He asked the queen why she was doing this. The queen replied that she was just establishing the rules of the palace. The king grew furious and warned her not to lay a finger on Unchai. The queen, unconvinced, argued that since losing her memory and regaining her position as queen, she couldn't even discipline a concubine. Unexpectedly, the king coldly replied, "You won't be queen for long." The queen panicked. She didn't know that the king had already discovered that the person responsible for the attempted murder of Unchai and her brother was the minister. Naively, the queen thought that once Unchai was out of the way, the king would finally give her his full attention. That night, she quietly snuck out of the palace and returned to the minister's residence to find her father's most trusted bodyguard. "Please," she begged, "I just want you to become like me. I want you to suffer like I do." She knew this guard had always loved her and would surely obey. As expected, seeing her pitiful state, the guard agreed. Back at the palace, the queen visited the king's grandmother and said she wished to take 2 of the concubines to Mount Renwang to pray for a child, hoping to bring fortune and fertility to the royal bloodline. Naturally, the grandmother approved. Meanwhile, as the king was handling official affairs, he suddenly blacked out. The royal physician examined him and reported, "Your pulse is weak and irregular, likely due to severe sleep deprivation." The royal chamberlain asked if it was serious. The physician replied that while manageable for now, if it continued, the king's health would be in grave danger. The king suspected this was a side effect of his recurring dreams about the future, especially those involving Unbo dreams. That night, he secretly summoned the court mage. He asked if these dreams caused more than just emotional strain. The mage explained that Unbo dreams were a power not meant for ordinary people, and she couldn't predict what might happen if they continued. The king asked if it was possible to block the dreams. She answered, yes, with forbidden spells. After getting the answer he needed, the king ordered her to keep everything confidential. She agreed. But that very night he dreamed again, this time of Unchai being shot in the heart. He jolted awake and immediately rushed to her chambers, hugging her tightly in fear. Unchai was confused. The king told her, for the next few days, you must not leave the palace. Someone is plotting against you. However, Unchai had already agreed to accompany the queen on the trip to pray. The king urged her to cancel, but Unchai insisted it was the perfect opportunity to expose the real culprit. Now that we know they're planning something, we can be ready, she said, assuring the king she would return safely. Seeing her determination, the king had no choice but to help her devise a meticulous plan. But could Unchai truly survive the danger? When she later saw a palace maid die protecting her, Unchai was devastated. The queen, on the other hand, was shaken. Her hired assassin had been captured by the arriving guards. Unchai stood in front of the queen and said, the assassin has been caught. We'll soon find out who was behind it all. I won't let them go unpunished. The queen was so frightened she couldn't even speak. When the king saw she had returned safely, he finally let out a sigh of relief. As for the queen, her father, the minister, slapped her in fury. Everything you've done, I had control of it all, and you ruined it. Years of planning, gone because of you. The minister was in utter despair. Meanwhile, in the palace, the assassin was being interrogated. All evidence confirmed he was the same killer who had attacked during the royal wedding. When he refused to confess, they brought in an undercover spy from the palace. After a full day and night of intense questioning, the spy finally cracked and confessed everything. With a full confession, the king ordered the minister's immediate arrest. Soldiers stormed the minister's residence and clashed with his guards. But during the chaos, a group of people arrived and blocked the soldiers, helping the minister and the queen escape. Hearing of the escape, the king was enraged. He immediately stripped the queen of her title and issued a nationwide arrest warrant for both her and her father. Now that no one stood in their way, the king and Unchai were finally able to enjoy some happiness together. But unexpectedly, the next day the king collapsed again. The royal chamberlain knew it was another side effect of the Unbo dream and told Unchai that only she could persuade the king. Unchai was stunned. It all seemed so unreal. The chamberlain warned her, if His Majesty continues refusing the spell work, his life will be in danger. So Unchai went to the king and begged him to undergo the ritual to block the dreams. But the king insisted on capturing the minister first before doing anything. Seeing how stubborn he was, Unchai said with tears in her eyes, "Nothing is more important than your life. If something happens to you, what will I do?" The king, unable to watch the woman he loved worry for him, finally agreed. That night, he summoned the court mage again. The court mage continuously rubbed her hands together, muttering incantations under her breath. After a series of rituals, the king's Unchai dreams were finally blocked. When he awoke the next day, his condition had significantly improved. Just when it seemed like a peaceful life was ahead, the fugitive minister made contact with a powerful military leader who had long coveted the throne. This leader revealed a shocking secret to the minister. Unchai was actually the twin sister of the late royal consort. The military leader then spread the news across the kingdom. The rumor quickly swept through the streets. In Joseon, twins were considered a bad omen and were traditionally executed at birth. Public pressure mounted, demanding the king investigate the truth behind the rumor. To avoid placing more burden on the king, Unchai decided to leave him. The king also knew that in the current political climate, keeping her by his side would only put her in greater danger. However, the next day, as Unchai departed the palace, the military leader's men were already waiting for her. The king's beloved Unchai was kidnapped by the ambitious general. A message was sent to the palace. The king must meet him alone the next day at noon. If he brought even one soldier, Unchai would be killed. The king was overwhelmed with guilt. He blamed himself for failing to protect Unchai. Desperate to save her, he summoned the court mage once more, asking her to restore his ability to foresee the future in dreams. With the mage's spell, the king re-entered the dream realm. In his dream, he saw a mountain. Unchai's hands were bound. The traitorous minister had ordered her execution. The king awoke in shock. He recognized the mountain. It was Samgak Mountain. He immediately commanded his soldiers to prepare for a night raid. That night, the king personally led the troops into the mountain. The minister and his daughter were captured on the spot. The military leader fled with Unchai. To ensure Unchai's safety, the king pursued them himself. The two men fought fiercely, exchanging dozens of blows. Eventually, the king subdued the general. Defeated and disgraced, the general took his own life. The gravely injured minister was executed as well. The powerful Kim family, who had conspired with him, couldn't escape punishment either. The king found a critical witness, Hang Chaopan, who had once taken the fall for the Kim family. He revealed that the true mastermind behind the treason and the framing of Unchai's father was the Kim family. Though they tried to defend themselves, the king wouldn't hear it. He stripped them of their positions and banished them to the borderlands. The dowager queen, who was complicit, was also sent to the cold palace. Just when it seemed everything had settled, the king suddenly collapsed again. Everyone panicked. From the palace eunuch, Unchai learned the truth. The king had made another Unchai dream to save her. She was both heartbroken and racked with guilt. She asked the court mage what she could do now. The mage replied, "The only thing you can do is stay away from the king. Only then can he truly recover." Unchai stood by his bedside, watching him sleep. Unwilling to part, but knowing she must, she whispered a final confession of love, then quietly left. When the king awoke the next morning, he asked the eunuch where Unchai had gone. The eunuch remained silent. The king immediately understood. She was gone. Time passed. 1 year later, with consistent care from the royal physician, the king's health had recovered. But his longing for Unchai had never faded. He summoned Unchai's dear friend and asked him to help search for her. One day, the friend learned of her whereabouts from a familiar contact and rushed to inform the king. Just as Unchai was about to leave her home, she spotted a familiar figure standing at the gate. "I didn't even know what was happening," she said, stunned. The king stepped forward without a word and pulled her into a tight embrace. As the two shared a long-awaited reunion, Unchai's mother came out, holding a chubby baby boy. After a year apart, the family was finally together again. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and drop a heart if you love the series.